everyone. My name is Aaron James Walsh. I'm one of your co hosts for this brand new Isaiah Speaks podcast brought to you by the Isaiah Institute. Yeah, I said this wouldn't happen, and it did. So I said, all I have to do is unmute Rebecca's mic, and I kept it muted. That's a great way to start our podcast this morning, or today.
We knew there would be a couple issues. That's okay.
We took a while to get everything up and running. We had some technical issues, but they're all taken care of as far as we know. We said a prayer, and I think it's going to work because we have faith. So we're looking forward to bringing you this new podcast each and every Sunday evening. And we are really excited for the content to share with you. And we wanted to do a little overview for everyone today about what makes the book of Isaiah unique, brought to you from the Isaiah Institute and from a lot of the research done by Avraham Gileadi over many, many years, and through the Isaiah Institute more recently. And because a lot of people have had troubles over the years understanding the words of Isaiah, and it seems to be those who read the Book of Mormon, historically, it's a part that a lot of people just kind of skip over and get to the other parts that are maybe to them a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah, understandably. Isaiah is one of the most difficult books to understand. And it was even for the Nephites back in Nephi's day. We read in Nephi 25, verse 1, Isaiah spake many things which were hard for many of my people to understand, for they knew not concerning the manner of prophesying among the Jews. And I think that's the same problem we have today. We don't understand how the Jews prophesy, especially here in our Western civilization. When we read books, we read them from beginning to end in a linear fashion. And Isaiah is not built that way. It's very different. But the manner of the Jews that Nephi is talking about is the Jewish methodology for analyzing the words of the prophets. And so we have two solutions for this that we're bringing to you from the Isaiah Institute. The first solution we have is that we have a better translation now of Isaiah. Avraham Gileadi, through the Isaiah Institute, has translated the book of Isaiah, and it is so much easier to understand. So that's our first advantage over the Nephites. The second advantage we have is that the Isaiah Institute has provided a lot of the literary tools that can be found on their websites and in different books that Avraham Gileadi has written. And so we're going to go over a few of those tools right now. Not all of them, because there are many, but we're going to give you a sampling of his literary tools, and they make all the difference in understanding Isaiah.
Yes, and with that, I'm now going to get my computer to actually work, because as we were preparing this, there were many glitches, and we were able to be very successful in working our way through all of the different glitches that we were facing. And it is a miracle. And when I say miracle, I mean miracle that this show is actually on at the moment, because it so again, I'm here.
Opposition in all things.
There's an opposition in all things. There is. And so this should have been working full screen. And I'm not sure why, but at the moment, we're going to create a new copy, because this wasn't playing ball with us for a second. It's just we've created an easy way for us to look through and
while you're bringing that up
here. So
while you're bringing that up, I might point out that I received a little feedback since our last video, and was asked what qualifications we have in teaching the book of Isaiah. Fair question. Um, we we are working with the Isaiah Institute very closely, and we do correspond with Avraham Gileadi himself. So there's that, but we aren't actually coming to you as the experts. We're really directing you to the Isaiah Institute and to Avraham Gileadi's books. Avraham Gileadi has spent 50 years studying Isaiah, teaching Isaiah, writing about Isaiah. He has studied in rabbinic school. He's translated the book of Isaiah, and he understands the manner of the Jews. And so he is our expert. And we wouldn't pretend to know what he knows. We're students of his, and we're just trying to direct our listeners to that well of information that we've found because it's life changing.
I'm on the same page as what you just said because I've just had this desire. Not sure. I've always had it where I've wanted to understand the words of Isaiah, but about a year ago, I stumbled across the Isaiah Institute website, and there's an app, and there's a lot of books that are available, and I'm like, okay, what is this Isaiah Institute? And so I just started looking into it, and starting to learn about Avraham Gileadi's research and how, it all was based on that to begin with, and then all of a sudden he then had other like-minded people to also assist him in unpacking Isaiah. But it's basically, you know, uh, based on his research initially, and so I got so excited that I could actually understand the words of Isaiah. And in my circle, just my friends who are also just wanting to finally understand the words of Isaiah, because we know it's a commandment basically to understand Isaiah. And if it's a commandment, why is it so hard to understand? And why is it that there's very few people who could really unpack it? And anyways, and so we stumbled across this website, and ever since I've been just trying to consume as much of it as I can. But I've so far only got through one of the many books that are there for us to read, and it's Decoding the Words of Isaiah. And great book, but it's only one so far. I've listened to the commentary of Avraham going through the book of Isaiah, and so, but it just seems like I'm such a newbie in this, and I'm so excited. The things that I've learned, though, are eye-opening. They're life-changing. Even the little bit that I've learned, just to realize how little I know, and to have these tools available to me and to all of us to be able to understand the words of Isaiah, which are so very important, not only to our personal lives, but to the age we live in, to these days that we're living in. There's so much that Isaiah has to say about what's going on in our day. And so we're just going to take a moment now that I have this slide somewhat ready to be able to use. We're going to see all the tabs I have open on the top of my computer, though. Before, we never had that. And just start going through some of the things, the literary tools, the features of Isaiah that help us to understand it. So Isaiah is organized in a chiastic mirror structure across the entire book. So it's divided into two parallel halves. So that's something that if you didn't really know about the book of Isaiah and it wasn't discovered, you wouldn't know it, right? And there's themes in the first half that mirror themes in the second half. And then the center highlights what about things about the Lord's deliverance and covenant promises. So it's a chiasm. And if you're not familiar with what a chiasm is, it's basically this. It's like it begins with the end. The end is the same as the beginning, and the middle is where the most important thing exists. And this happens in many scriptures. And so Isaiah was deliberately composed as a unified work and not randomly composed. And
Right.
go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah. So So you read Isaiah very different than you would a book from Western culture. You know, you don't read from beginning to end. You would pick, you know, some of your chapters in the beginning would correspond with chapters in the middle. And some of the chapters in the middle would correspond with chapters at the end of the book. And that's how you have to read Isaiah. It's because, like you talked about, the first half mirrors the second half, and then you have these running themes going through it. Like you have ruin and rebirth, you have rebellion and compliance, you have punishment and deliverance, you have humiliation and exaltation. And we see that with the messianic figure and the tyrant. So it's very interesting how Isaiah, the structure and the mechanics of it work, because you really have to compare those different, you know, you can read them from the opposing sides, or you can read them as parallels, or in these different themes, like I was reading. You've also got suffering and salvation, you have disloyalty and loyalty, you have disinheritance and inheritance. So, depending on the theme or the lens you want to read Isaiah on, is how you're going to get the message of Isaiah. But it's so layered and there's so many structures to it. And it's just so different than how we're used to reading a book. But as you
It's not
would,
like someone can just tell me about it. Can you just give me a quick summary of what Isaiah is? It's not the kind of book you can do that with. There's like you
oh,
said. So you just mentioned a few things, and you know, if someone wants to go back and, you know, go over what you said again, and all of these things are found in all of the books that are available on the Isaiah Institute website, which we
yeah,
encourage all y'all to start from one. I would suggest Isaiah Decoded to begin with.
yeah,
It's good
forward.
for me, but
I can get this in the
got to
camera.
go the other way there.
Other way.
There we
Okay.
go. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So a literary message of Isaiah.
So that's going to take you through the many different literary structures that are kind of overlaid on top of each other. You could think of this as like a pizza, and you've got your different layers going up, but maybe a sandwich is better because it's the chiasm, right? So you've got your pieces on top of each other, and then you've got your insights. Um,
That's a
but
really
yeah,
good
there's,
analogy is to use a sandwich because you have the two pieces of bread, which are the same, but
yeah,
this chiasmus sandwich would be bread on the bottom and the top, and then you'd have lettuce, let's say, on, you know, under each or over the bread on the bottom and under the bread on the top, and then you'd have tomato on the bottom, tomato on and then eventually you have the most important thing.
yeah, the
Every
heart would
sandwich
be
has
right
a
in the
most
middle.
important thing, and usually it's a meat for those meat eaters out there. Or if
Yeah.
it's the veggie people, it's going to be avocado or it's going to be cucumber. So there's usually something that's the main thing in the middle of the
Yeah.
sandwich, and that's the main message of a chiasm.
Yes.
Really great analogy.
Thanks.
Another thing I found interesting, and Latter-day Saints will appreciate this, is that we know that after this life, there are many levels that you obtain, whether it be the glory of the sun, the glory of the moon, the glory of the stars. And within each of those glories, there's sub-glories as well. And so Isaiah talks about during this life, our spiritual progression. There's also a similar type of that, and it's 7 spiritual categories. He describes archetypal types of people representing spiritual levels. And so we will begin with the lowest, and we would hope that, you know, nobody can identify with this one, but it would be perdition or tyrant. So not very nice. Somebody who maybe knows the truth and fights against it, or fights against people that are, you know, trying to do good. The second, Babylon or wicked. Third, and these are levels again, right? And they're just named. So it's a spiritual ladder, so to speak. And on the bottom, perdition, tyrant. The next level would be Babylon. So the worldly people. They're not, you know, going to be ruling over anyone or bombing, you know, countries, or but they're they're wicked, they're Babylon, they're worldly people. The third would be maybe good people, people that are have heard about the word of God and they're trying to live it to some extent. Uh, for Zion, Jerusalem, these are people that are taking their faith to the next level and really trying to live it. That's when they're making covenants with God and they're really understanding it. And then that just leads us to the next level where you're in and of yourself. You're not doing commandments because they're a commandment. They become part of you. You're God's sons or servants. You're doing it because you want to do it. And then you can even rise higher. And there's very few who may be able to do it in this life, but seraphim are angelic beings, and then seven, which is the highest, and Latter-day Saints will also relate to this, and that's the celestial kingdom where you're able to live with the Lord and be like the Lord or be as he is type of thing. And so I hope I was okay in describing some of those. I took a little bit of liberty, Rebecca, and so you can correct me if I was wrong on any of those.
No, that was very good. Um, One thing I might add is that where you are on that ladder depends what level of covenant you are willing to keep. And so we are all kind of, depending on how we're doing in life, if we're keeping our covenants and we're striving to live higher laws, then we're moving up the ladder. And if we're not able to keep the covenants that we have learned and that we've been held to, then we're descending that ladder. And this is what Jacob's ladder is. This describes it very well in Genesis 28:12. He says, "And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending it." And so, as you climb this ladder, you are held to higher and higher standards of these covenants. The higher laws would you would be held to as you climb this ladder, just like Jesus had commandments of his Father that were much higher than anyone else is going to be held to in this life because he was on that highest rung of the ladder. And so, but the same thing, if people understand the covenants and then they are fighting them, and maybe they have received very high laws and then they choose evil and they choose to fight God, then they're going to end up at that perdition level.
And I'm
So it's
really,
very,
people might say, well, why didn't I hear about this? Or why isn't this always taught in my congregation, no matter what religion it might be or whatever? And I'm kind of grateful for that. In a way, as I'm learning about these spiritual places on this ladder, if it was known to the common Christian or the common, person of faith, you'd see that we're always going to be comparing ourselves. Oh, that's someone they're in the Babylon category, or oh, you know what? No, they're God's sons and servants and daughters of God, or it's like we would be always kind of focused on what level we were on rather than just doing it, and just being real with it. You could really see this turning into something where, where it becomes, something negative, let's say, where we're judging other people and saying, well,
yeah,
they're here or there.
that could be. So yeah, maybe it takes the pressure off a little bit, but it, but it does, but it's interesting in Isaiah because all of these levels show up. And
Hmm.
Isaiah, on a level, is teaching you about them. And it teaches you what it is to be on the Zion,
Hmm.
Jerusalem level, or what it is to be at the Jacob Israel level.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting to hear Avraham talk about how he discovered those, because he would see these titles and then they would always be corresponding to a people that lived a certain way. And so he started to put together, well, this is talking about different levels. He's a genius. I can't believe he put this together. But now it's like, but now that he's pointed it out, It's really easy to see it in Isaiah, and you can see it in the other scriptures, which is another benefit to studying Isaiah. Once you see some of these things in Isaiah, they show up in your other scriptures.
Okay, now this kind of lends itself to the third thing we wanted to point out here would be Isaiah uses types of end time figures. So a lot of people are interested in prophecy, let's say, and Isaiah is chock full of it. He frequently speaks in types of archetypes rather than naming individuals. So he's not going to come out and name these, prophetic figures that are going to be in the last days by name, but you have to kind of uncover them by him using the king of Babylon, let's say. He's a symbol of end time tyranny, or the Assyrian archetype of the invading world power. And then, so that's on the evil side, but there's also good side. So God always counteracts the evil, just like in the days of Moses, he sent a servant to free the people, let my people go. So, and that all stems from, and this can be controversial to some people, and it really should have, you should spend some time really contemplating this. And it's the Davidic servant, a righteous leader who helps gather Israel. Daughter of Zion or son of Zion, a faithful covenant people, but it's daughter of Zion. And these represent patterns that repeat in history. So there's all these things. We've heard the term history repeats itself, and it can't be any truer than in Isaiah. And he uses the past to teach us the future.
So true. That was one of the things I learned from studying Isaiah that was so interesting to me, how the Jews used keywords and code names in order to teach you and to prophesy. That was something totally new to me. And I found that so interesting. And you can see it in the other scriptures as well. But Isaiah, like you said, is chocked full of them. Like the king of Babylon exalts himself in the beginning, and then he's humiliated. In Isaiah, that's talked about in Isaiah 14. And then you've got the king of Zion, who is the good king who suffers humiliation at first, and then he is exalted in the end. And so, and you read these things in parallels or juxtaposed to each other. And I never read my scriptures that way. And now I can see how the scriptures always teach you in that way. They will show you the righteous versus the wicked. They'll show you the tyrant versus the righteous king. And this is something that was totally new to me, that just blew my mind when I started to research Isaiah through the Isaiah Institute and through Avraham Gileadi's books.
And it's, and these themes are ones that, as people of faith, we're familiar with, and that's those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And it just really unpacks that whole idea there, and talks about there's going to be one who's going to come on the scene who exalts himself above all we've ever seen, who will be lowered below all. And just like Jesus lowered himself below all, he's exalted above all. And that's an archetype of something we can all go through, or we will all go through. In order to climb that spiritual ladder, we need to descend before we ascend. And I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that as well a little bit later.
But that was something I could see in my own personal life, that when I had gone through a severe descent phase, a time of trial and humiliation and suffering, that it had been followed by this great ascent phase where I had, grown spiritually and come up to this new level of knowledge. I mean, I could see it personally in my own life, not just in the scriptures. That's why it applies to us on a personal level.
I remember my wife, when we would go through really challenging times and things that are just come out of left field, and one thing after another, and you just feel like, what is going on? And then we'd look at each other and say, something good's around the corner.
Yeah.
Because it's natural. It's like, wow, something's good's about to happen, because things are like really trying us and really bringing us down or really challenging us. And then afterwards, and it was always true, there was something that was going to be very good on the horizon, and it happened. And so life is full of that, and Isaiah points it out very well. So also, covenant blessings and cursings, there's a pattern. A central theme in Isaiah is called the covenant cycle. So people break the covenant, and this is similar to what many might speak of the pride cycle. So people break a covenant, the judgment or destruction follows, a righteous remnant repents, and then God restores and delivers them. And you could say the cycle then continues, right? Because history does repeat itself, and this pattern does repeat itself throughout Isaiah and mirrors the ancient covenant structure found in the Torah.
Yeah. God works through his covenants when he deals with his people. And we see that all through the scriptures. We see a really good example of it with Moses and the Sinai covenant. And we see it all through Isaiah with the Davidic covenant. I encourage everyone to go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. And that's where you will read about all the covenant blessings and the covenant curses. And what's interesting about them is that at first they start off kind of not so bad. They're bad things. Talking about the curses, they start out kind of weak curses, and then as you continue to read, they get worse and they get worse and they get worse and they get worse. They get totally awful to where it ends with people eating the flesh of their children. I mean, it's like horrific how bad the curses get. And that's the same with the covenant blessings. It's like if you start to keep the covenants, then you get these light blessings, and then they go greater and greater until if you've kept high enough covenants and you've proven yourself loyal under all conditions, those covenants become unconditional. And that's where we're talking about those highest covenant promises of Abraham and the everlasting covenant, things like that.
We just experienced a horrendous snowstorm in my neck of the woods. It was called the snowstorm of the century. And that just reminded me, it's a snowball effect in either way. Either you're going to be a snowball in a bad direction or a snowball in a good direction. It'll start out small, start keeping the covenants, you start doing it more and more, then more people start doing it. So now you're doing it as a community. You're going to get blessed more and more, and the blessings keep getting bigger and bigger as you follow God. And then the opposite is true as well. And God has so much mercy. He's going to always want his people to repent, give them every opportunity. But if they don't, he has so much mercy that eventually it ends up to the point where you can become really entrenched in wickedness, and those covenant curses become very, very apparent. But yeah, just looking at them, it gives it a word to understand. Relationship therapy or whatever, when you have words that you can identify with emotions or whatever, then you know what to call it after. So people see these things, at least Isaiah points it out, that it's because it's covenant keeping or covenant breaking. And so either you're blessed or you're cursed based on those. And many people of faith these days don't really talk too much about covenants. It's not really known out there that we make and keep covenants. And that's it's always been part of God's way of dealing with his children.
It's true. And these covenants stay intact. If your fathers agreed to covenants, then you are held to them. And I don't think people understand that. I don't think people who decide to become atheist, I don't think they realize that they're held to those covenants, whether they believe in them or not. And the covenant blessings and the covenant curses apply to them. So it's good to get educated on all this. And it really is, like you were saying, the Lord's mercy. It is so merciful that he sends these curses to kind of get us back on the right track. That is really mercy in the end. It seems harsh when we read about these covenant curses, but it is love and it is mercy. And it does work. People do turn back If they understand their scriptures and they understand what's happening, that's the answer. Is when you see these covenant curses, it's time to turn back. And then you're encouraged by the blessings. So you would naturally, once you began to be blessed, you would want more of those blessings and you would want to keep higher laws. So that would encourage you to climb higher.
I can't say I agree any more than I agree 100% with you. So, next, remnant theme. That's also something that is covered from Isaiah. He's emphasizing only a small, faithful remnant surviving major judgments. Now, this is a hard type of a doctrine for, I guess, the masses to know that, there's only a remnant that's going to survive God's judgments upon the earth in the latter days. So there's the remnant returns to the covenant faithfulness as we talk about covenants. So there's a group of people who really understand what covenants are and keeping them and they do keep them, and they're protected by God, and they help establish Zion. And the idea of a remnant of Israel is one of Isaiah's dominant themes.
It really is. And it is part of the gathering of the house of Israel that Isaiah talks about. That's a big theme in the book of Isaiah. And of course, we have an end time servant who is commissioned with that work. So that is a big theme in Isaiah, and it's really important to understand. And again, God's loving mercy that as the end times wrap up and we are looking at the wicked being destroyed at some point, God's going to gather out a righteous remnant and lead them to Zion, which is in the New Jerusalem or the Old Jerusalem. We'll have those two gathering places, which is talked about in Isaiah as well. But we see that in the Book of Mormon too, like over and over. You see little groups that are gathered. Just it starts with one, right? Lehi takes his family and goes into the wilderness. They're a righteous remnant. But you see it all through the Book of Mormon. You see it in the Bible.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch a little bit more on the wilderness idea. We see it so much, like you said, in scriptures, where people have to leave the wicked world. It's not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but that's one of them. Leaving Egypt, the children where Moses leads the children of Israel out of Egypt and out of captivity. They go into the wilderness. Like you said, Lehi goes into the wilderness with his family. They leave the wicked and just kind of break off and go out and live according to God's ways by themselves in a small group. And history again repeats itself. It's just a pattern that happens, and Isaiah talks about that also happening in the latter days on a large scale. And speaking of fulfillment of prophecy in the latter days, he talks about a dual fulfillment of prophecy. So this is the thing. Understanding Isaiah's prophecies, many people might miss the mark because he's already talking about things in his own time. So you think, well, he's just giving a record of what's going on in his day, right? But then you dig a little bit more into it, and he actually uses duality of prophesying using history, the history of his time, what's happening in future time, and then what happens in the last days. So he could share something and it has, three different time frames to it where he's prophesying where it would be fulfilled at three different times: his time, a future time, and the end time. And it's really important to see this because you'll miss what it means for our day, living where we would believe we're living in the latter days, and a lot of times where these end time prophecies will be fulfilled. And this is called typological prophecy.
Yeah. So lots of times when we view history, we look at it as linear. Once again, us and our Western civilization. But history in the scriptures and is described as cyclical, like a circle. It's going in a circle and it's repeating. And that's where we get the idea of history repeats itself. Or as Isaiah says, I tell the end from the beginning, from ancient things or ancient times, things not yet done. 46:10. Because everything has a type and shadow. Everything is like on repeat. And that's a theme that you come across in Isaiah. It's very interesting. I see it all over the place now. Once you understand typology and that the scriptures are typological, you can't unsee that. Then you're seeing types and shadows everywhere. It is crazy. I would say, first of all, you've got Isaiah's fulfillment of his prophecies on his day. And then Jesus in, let's see, Luke 4 says that he is the fulfillment of Isaiah 61. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is in me. And so you've got that fulfillment. But then you also have the end time fulfillment. And so we see these fulfillments all over. I would argue church history is a type and shadow of what we see in Isaiah. And as you learn Isaiah, you'll see that because you see that like the Latter-day Saints go on an exodus with Brigham Young after Joseph Smith dies. You see that exodus imagery again. And you see that there's this servant that's restoring righteousness. He's a type and shadow of the servant in Isaiah. So it's really interesting how many layers, and God is so interesting and he's so intelligent in how he writes history. I would argue that the Lord is choreographing history as it happens, to follow these structures.
Yeah, and we could miss the mark if we say, oh, no, that scripture was fulfilled. Like I said, any one of those times, oh, it was fulfilled in Isaiah's day. Oh, it was fulfilled in Jesus's time. Oh, it was fulfilled when the saints were led out west. Well, yeah, you're right. They're fulfilled at all of those times and even then some. So it's up to us to see what Isaiah was telling us and be open to these types and shadows and the fact that these prophecies, some were specifically meant for certain times, but others were meant for latter-day times, and some were dually, could be fulfilled multiple times. But it's just important to know as you're reading Isaiah, you just don't take it at the surface level. You have to pick at it, dig into it, and really understand. You can't just read a verse and say, oh yeah, no, I understand that now, and walk away. You really have to unpack it. And that's good because that's where God has all of his learning, and you have to put in the effort. You have to pay the price. You can't just read the overview of, just read the chapter headings and you'll get the idea kind of thing. That's Isaiah was not meant to be read in that manner.
No, and you can't proof text scriptures. You can't take one scripture and assign it to a subject. And we see that a lot in the LDS church with people giving talks and things. You have to have respect for scriptures and the context in which that Jewish prophet meant that scripture to be read in. Like, you can't take a scripture and run with it. You have to look at the overall context of not just the chapter even, but the whole book and how that little scripture is played into the context of the whole overarching context of what that prophet is teaching you. So important that we respect our scriptures. And like you said, take the time to really analyze and unpack the significance of what they're saying.
Like, I'm grateful for the little journalistic organization that I have in my little town that I run that allows me to think by asking questions all the time. So if I read a scripture, I'll take it and I'll say, okay, that's what I think it means, and that's fine. But is that actually what it means? So I'll be okay and be open-minded and not be emotionally attached that just because I thought that's what it meant, now I have to hold that so near and dear to my heart for the rest of my life that that's the gospel truth is just what I thought it meant. That's not going to work great for me because that's if that wasn't what God meant for that scripture to mean, that's not really. I want to know what God meant by writing, inspiring these prophets to write, and in this case, Isaiah. I'm not going to know if I don't really ask these questions. Did he really mean that? Okay, is there more to it? Is there something I don't understand? Can I learn more? Can I look at it at a different angle? Are there others who look at it in a certain way? Are there different translations that might lend, a little bit more? Like sometimes people read scriptures in other languages because other languages are able to add so much texture and so much color or other angles that we didn't really think about. And I believe that's what the Lord wants us to do. He really wants us to feast on the word and really understand it. And it's not just the word at that point. Then revelation can kick in where the Lord himself can reveal meanings to us by the Spirit as we're opening up ourselves, we're preparing ourselves spiritually, we're putting in the work, and the Lord himself can reveal, just like he did to the prophets in the first place, what these scriptures actually meant. But at least here we have the tools to get in there and get into the weeds and really kind of understand enough that we can start, putting ourselves in the position where we can receive revelation and know for ourselves what these prophets are telling us.
Absolutely.
So now the final thing that we have prepared for the podcast today would be prophetic end time scenarios. They're the main end time scenario. Isaiah described a future sequence of events, including the global political upheaval. If anyone watches the news today, we know that there's lots going on in that regard. And here, the rise of a tyrannical world power, similar to that of Babylon, the destruction of a corrupt society or corrupt societies, the gathering of Israel, the deliverance of the righteous, and the establishment of Zion. And this is a lot to unpack in these just 6 points here. Isaiah has one of the most detailed prophetic blueprints in the Bible of the end time scenario. So those that are students of prophecy, Isaiah has a lot to do with our day.
And it's interesting how much Isaiah lines up with Revelations. I've been trying to read a chapter of Isaiah and a chapter of Revelations every day. And it's so interesting how interconnected those two books are. Like, there are so many similar themes going on in both. And if you read those books both together, it's amazing how much they line up and how much, obviously Isaiah saw what John the Revelator saw. But you're right, it's all about the end times. It really is. Isaiah is all about the lens that you put on when you read it. So if you're going to read it from a historical lens, you put your historical glasses on. If you're going to read it from an end time lens, which is the most significant one to us, that's the one we really are interested in, then you put your end time glass lenses on. And all sorts of things begin to unfold to you that are really important to know. We want to know what's coming. And the Lord has given us this book that's given us warnings and given us information that will be helpful for us to know as we move forward. Like I was saying last time, there is a storm raging. We see it in the news every time you watch the news. If you go to the grocery store and you buy groceries, there's a financial storm that's kicking up. Or you go to gas up and just the things that our children are exposed to with social media or problems we have in the schools or game social media stuff. There's a lot of problems there. So all these answers in Isaiah are so significant to us to understand what is happening in our society and where it is going and what we can do. And it's interesting with the code names. We have Egypt, just to name one. just to get into the last days and name one of them, is Egypt is our code name for America. And we know that because Egypt was the superpower back in Isaiah's day. And it was this great civilization that nobody thought could fall. It had the most powerful military, and all the countries surrounding it went to Egypt for help. And we kind of see a similar situation happening in our world, where America is the superpower. And all these countries are going to America saying, hey, we need help. Like Israel goes to America and says, help us out, help us fight these wars. We need your military strength. And so Isaiah has a lot to say about Egypt. And it's very significant to our day and what's happening. We see these prophecies happening before our eyes. I mean, you've talked with me about it, Aaron, how we can see the words of Isaiah coming to life before our eyes. And it's really incredible.
It's funny how I tell people that. I say in Isaiah, when he's referring to Egypt, he's referring to the United States. And everybody I've said that to already, their eyes get big and go, what? Really? Like, how is that? Like, and I said, well, you just have to start studying it and you'll see. But basically, it's like he's using the country, like you just explained, the biggest of his time that it compares to. And he's not going to come out and say America. Like, why would he do that? It didn't exist at the time. Sure, could the Lord have told him that that's what the name of the country would be, and he's going to do it? How many times have prophets ever done that, really, when they're talking about the future? Have you ever read anywhere in the Old Testament where they talk about cars? But yet they talk about chariots.
Yeah.
And, that they're like the fire, and there's fire coming out of chariots and stuff, and they drive really fast. So they're using things of their day to show something in the future, and Isaiah was just using the example of his day, and it just works. It's carbon copy. You can just superimpose it over today, and all the same things that Egypt were of that day, America is of our day. And so he is talking in a future sense. So we see, is Egypt a world power at the moment? Well, no, it can't be Egypt today. There's no doubt it's not Egypt. So what country is he talking about, right?
And yeah, it has to be. But the good news is that Nephi tells us in 2 Nephi chapter 25:7, in the days that the prophecies of Isaiah shall be fulfilled, men shall know of a surety at the times when they shall come to pass. And continuing of that, he says, for I know that they shall be of great worth unto them in the last days, for in that day shall they understand them. Wherefore, for their good have I written them. So it's a promise. Nephi is promising that we will understand these prophecies when they happen. We will recognize them. If we're studying Isaiah, if we're studying our scriptures and we really understand what Isaiah is saying, we will understand these prophecies. And beyond that, we'll know what to do when things get rough, when the end time storm hits us, we'll know what to do.
And speaking of knowing what to do, to the words of Isaiah, the Isaiah Institute has provided so many websites with different themes to help us to be able to understand the words of Isaiah. And I don't know if Rebecca, if you wanted to go through some of the ways, or to get get studying the book of Isaiah through these different websites.
Absolutely. Isaiah Prophecy is a very simple website, but it is an awesome website. It has 30 different typological events that are found in the book of Isaiah that Avraham Gileadi has discovered, and the Isaiah Institute has so wonderfully put in this website. So if you want to find out 30 typological events that happened in Isaiah's day that will repeat in the end times, such as this Exodus we were talking about, then that is the website to check out. It is fascinating, the 30 different end time events. It's really interesting to read about them. You can go to Isaiah Explained. So that is an awesome, awesome website because it has all of the chapters of Isaiah, and it has a commentary on every single one of them. It's the Isaiah Institute's translation, so it's easier to understand. But then on the side, you can click on the commentary tool, and Avraham Gileadi's commentary will come up, and it will take you verse by verse through the different chapters of Isaiah, and it is phenomenal. I mean, it explains every word of what these chapters and these verses are saying. So interesting. I highly recommend going on there and listening to them. It's absolutely free. The IsaiahInstitute.com, that's their main website, and it has the store where you can buy the books, but it also breaks down a lot of the main themes in Isaiah. And then we've got the Isaiah newsletter that I highly recommend you sign up for. It's a weekly newsletter that talks about different themes in Isaiah, but it also has articles that will relate what's happening in our current day to different ideas in Isaiah. Really interesting. I look forward to those every week. And then we've got a donate link, and we've got the book discussion groups link. So yeah, check all those links out. They are awesome and they are free.
Yeah, there's lots going on at the Isaiah Institute. There's no doubt about it. And it's so, just a well of knowledge and just, it's just so much to dive into. It's like it's a well. I guess it's a never ending well of knowledge. It's like an ocean of knowledge from one book. And it's so incredible when you really think about all of the unique things from Isaiah's writings that change us spiritually and then give us the knowledge of who we are as a people, why things are the way they are, where we came from, where we're going. And you can definitely tell why Jesus, of all people, commanded us to read the words of Isaiah, because great are the words of Isaiah. And I now am able to understand even a little bit of what he was talking about in that. And so hopefully through these podcasts, we'll be able to unpack one thing at a time kind of thing, delve into some of these things we talked about today, where we just gave an overview, where we can just drill down into some of these specific topics for you. We welcome comments, so people just be able to comment on the show if you have something you wanted to add. They're lives, so you're able to comment and add to the conversation, because this is basically, we're doing this. We're not experts, but we're learning like you are, and we want to learn more. And we found through the Isaiah Institute, it's offering the tools to be able to do that.
Yes. And our friends at the Isaiah Institute are writing content for us from the newsletters. So I'm excited to delve into some of that. We might hit that the next time.
Yeah, for
That'd be
sure.
awesome, because that content, it does what the newsletters contents does. It will connect what's happening in our day and tie it into what Isaiah's prophecies were saying. So that's where Isaiah gets really interesting.
For sure. So I'm grateful that I was able to spend this time tonight, and so thankful to be able to work alongside yourself, Rebecca. And we made it. We did it. We reached the end of our first live podcast, Isaiah Speaks podcast, on behalf of the Isaiah Institute. So with that, we'll see you all next week and talk a little bit more about the book of Isaiah. And Rebecca gets the last word on the podcast.
All right. Well, we're so grateful to Aaron with his technical skills and him helping us out with this podcast. He's amazing. But yeah, big thank you to the Isaiah Institute. Their work is so amazing, and they're doing so much good for everyone. Go to their websites and check them out.
For sure. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week, next Sunday. Have a wonderful, safe week. God bless.